Mike Pence has been increasingly aggressive in going after his former boss, Donald Trump, as well as Joe Biden. Here's my sit-down with the former vice president. Mike Pence, welcome.
Thank you so much, Howard. Good to see you.
Same here. Mr. Vice President, you said in Iowa this week that an impeachment inquiry should never start without a vote of the full House. But then when Kevin McCarthy did it unilaterally, you said, well, you'll defer to his judgment. Why didn't you stick to your original position?
Well, I'm sticking to my position, Howie. I said I would have preferred that they'd taken a House vote, and they may yet. You remember when Nancy Pelosi unilaterally started an impeachment inquiry. Came under a lot of criticism. Ultimately, it was about a couple months later, they had a House floor vote. Look, impeachment is very serious business, but I do want to commend I want to commend House Republicans for the yeoman's work they've done. Present company accepted. An awful lot of people in the media have ignored the ethical cloud around the Biden administration. We go back to the waning days of the 2020 campaign and how many in the national media and online literally suppressed the story in the New York Post about Hunter Biden
and his laptop.
So I think House Republicans have done important work holding the administration accountable, bringing facts forward to the public, and I welcome the initiation of the inquiry.
Many in the media have praised you for refusing to block the Electoral College certification on January 6th, and yet most MAGA voters are upset with you because they believe when Trump says the election was stolen and they wanted you to stop it. So hasn't that put you in a political box making both sides unhappy?
Well, I would tell you, I know that's a little bit of the framing that many in the national media use to describe the Republican electorate today. But frankly, over the last couple of years, I've been deeply moved. How many people have made a point to come up to me in airports and grocery stores and just thank me for the stand that we took? I think people know whatever they thought of the election. And there were irregularities. That we took them to court. We challenged them. But I think more and more Republicans have come to realize that by God's grace, I kept my oath to the Constitution that day. Now, we've got to restore public confidence in election integrity.
Here's what I don't get. You're constantly praising the 4-year conservative record of the Trump-Pence administration. Right. Now you turn around and say that you're the real conservative in the race and that Donald Trump is offering, and this is a quote, a siren song of populism unmoored from true conservatism. How is that possible? Did he morph into something else?
When Donald Trump ran for president in 2016, he promised to govern as a conservative. For 4 years, we governed as conservatives. We rebuilt our military. We stood strong on the world stage. We exercised American leadership. We stood with our allies, stood up to our enemies. Our military took down the ISIS caliphate. We stood with Israel as never before. We took down
a long list.
Qasem Soleimani. Here at home, we cut taxes, we rolled back regulations, and we appointed conservatives to our courts at every level, including 3 of the justices that sent Roe versus Wade to the ash heap of history. We governed as conservatives. But I will tell you what voters deserve to know is that Donald Trump makes no such promise today. He's backing away from America as leader of the free world, talking the language of appeasement in the face of Russian aggression in Eastern Europe and the war raging in Ukraine. With regard to entitlements, Howie, Donald Trump's position is identical to Joe Biden's. Neither one of them even want to talk about what's mostly driving, reforming programs that are driving our national debt and really threaten the vitality of our economy in the future. And on the subject of the right to life, look, we were the most pro-life administration in history. But since we left office, Donald Trump has actually blamed election losses in 2022 on overturning Roe versus Wade. And he, like others, is trying to relegate the question of abortion to states only.
You've called for a federal abortion ban. 15 weeks would be a good starting point, you say, 15 weeks of pregnancy. But given how strongly you feel as a matter of faith, is that a big compromise for you rather than something stricter?
Well, let me take issue with a premise in your question.
Go ahead.
If I can. I mean, Donald Trump actually blamed losses in the midterm elections on us overturning Roe versus Wade. You know, when I look at the midterm elections, it was candidates that were focused on the future did very well. Candidates who were focused on the past, and many candidates he endorsed that were relitigating the last election, did not fare well, including in states that we should have done well. So I honestly, I take a different view of 2022 than my former running mate does. And I think the facts speak for themselves. That being said, look, when the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, they returned the question of abortion not just to the states, but to the states and the American people. The American people elect presidents, they elect senators, they elect congressmen. And I believe, even as we recognize that most of the progress for us as pro-lifers is going to happen in states around the country, and I've strongly supported those efforts.
You say that Donald Trump's agenda is driven largely by personal grievances. What do you mean by that?
I just think if we focus this election on the past in 2024, we're going to miss a historic opportunity, not just to win the White House, but to expand a majority in the House and win back the Senate and win state houses around the country. Look, the American people are fed up. Joe Biden's policies have weakened this country at home and abroad. And I think by complaining about the last election or complaining about people that don't see that last presidential election in the same way he did, or the Constitution the same way, we're going to be focused in on each other when we should be focused outward, carrying our agenda everywhere to the American people. And I think it's a pathway to victory.
And just briefly, you suggested earlier that the media are being rather soft in the coverage of President Biden, perhaps protective of him. Do you think that's deliberate?
I do. You
don't get the same kind of coverage?
No. Look, you know, what we lived through for the 4 years of the Trump-Pence administration, 2.5 years of the Russia hoax, you know, it was extraordinary. And then the president being impeached for a phone call. There was a relentless effort, not just by the Democrats. You know, they can be the opposition party out there, but for their allies in the media to chase after every single unsubstantiated allegation, all the while spending most of the last 2 years looking the other way about very real issues. I mean, think about this. I mean, I was vice president of the United States, Howie.
I remember.
And the idea that a sitting vice president, Joe Biden's family, accepted some $20 million, which is a hard fact, is not really disputed, during the time he was vice president, and that they were, by one account, selling the Joe Biden brand to foreign nationals and foreign corporate. Look, the American people deserve the facts.
Vice President Pence, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Howie. Good to be with you.
After the break, more liberal commentators who once backed Joe Biden now say he's too old to run again.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.